Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the April 3rd JupyterLab weekly call. Somebody just signed on as I was going to count. I think we have 13 people on right now. And let's see, how many things do we have in the agenda? Okay, we have 2 people in the agenda, so it seems like a good time to talk would be right now because there's plenty of space for you. Actually, I'm going to want to say something, so that's still only 3 people. But why don't we get started with Mike?
Okay, so my first item is an announcement that JupyterLab 4.2 Beta 0 has been released yesterday, and it includes most of the major pull requests and features added that we wanted to add, or at least those who were ready by the time when we set the deadline. There are some pull requests which are ready for the review, but were not reviewed yet. And one of those that I wanted to mention and maybe talk a bit in more detail today is the high contrast theme. The pull request only implements the dark theme for now, and I believe that the binder is actually building. So I'm sharing the link to the binder. If anyone would like to try it out and maybe leave a review, that would be nice. From my point of view, this is a good effort to improve accessibility. It's also potentially not polished, and the author of the pull request has communicated that they won't be able to address further issues or add further refinements. So my general question is how folks think about merging this, and then if there are no objections, I also have like more technical question on whether we want to add Galata helpers, but that's can be taken offline. I left a comment on the pull request. Any immediate thoughts on this topic? So I see a question in the chat from Tony. Is this a default or just an option? So this is just an option. By default, you would have the light theme and there is the same dark theme as we already have. Actually, maybe I can share my screen. Let's do that. Okay. So I'm changing the theme. So there's light, there's dark, and this pull request is adding dark high contrast. Is the zoom level okay, or is it too stretched?
Might be good to zoom a little bit more in for the recording's sake. Thank you.
Okay. So you can see that the edges are bright white compared to the bright to the full black background, and it's the same like typing. It uses stronger colors. There are still some things which could be improved, like for example this button, its color. I don't know whether that's the optimal choice of colors. And in the terminal, we can actually force the terminal to behave even better. This is we can force contrast ratio in the xterm.js, but that can be implemented separately. And one other improvement in that pull request is the behavior of the focus indicator. So now the focus outline is on the file browser in the sidebar. And this is an improvement according to the author of the pull request. But I don't think this is a high enough contrast. I struggle to see this indicator as I move it between the items. But other than that, I think that's neat, and I'll be happy to include that even just in a pre-release and see whether any user has thoughts.
I think that color of the plus button being the same color as the focus would improve its visibility some. And I think I saw a comment pop up in the chat about its thickness too, it being not thick enough. Or sorry, it went by before I read it. Yeah, the focus is too narrow, says Tony in the chat.
Okay.
But this is sweet. Thank you for showing it.
Yeah. So I guess I will, unless there are any other comments, I will merge it as it is. Though I personally would probably prefer not expanding the Galata API. So just looking for confirmation of that one. Okay, moving on. There is a pull request which started rather innocently, upgrading to the latest Lumino version, but because of failures on the CI, it ended up doing way more, and it actually addresses a number of issues. And this is because in the latest Lumino version, there are 2 pull requests which improve how prevent default is handled. And this means that if a code mirror command calls prevent default on an event, it will not be executed. The associated command will not be executed. And that meant that we need to disable or change handling of so code mirror commands. And because these pull requests now adds a dedicated command for 4 or 5 of the commands which were previously just code mirror commands, it will address frequently requested enhancements or problems that people had. So for example, for users of non-US keyboard, it was often impossible to comment, to toggle the comment syntax on the code. And there were like 42 people upvoting that issue. So this is just a heads up that I would like to squeeze that into 4.2, even though technically it is adding some functionality after the deadline, but like we need anyways to upgrade to Lumino to fix another issue, which is even more pressing with the international keyboard. We need to upgrade to this Lumino version, and we can either partially revert the changes in Lumino or resolve it as in this pull request. So I think it makes sense to move forward with the proposed approach. Because it's not ready for merging, because some of the visual tests are still highlighting that there are some differences in shortcut handling, but I will iron it out and add needs review label when it's ready. Okay, if there are no comments, I just wanted to also mention that the CI is currently failing because of a new release of maintainer tools. And there is a pull request which attempts to fix some of that, but I don't know whether I will be able to resolve that myself. Yeah, maybe we should talk about how these maintainer tools are versioned so that they don't break on patch releases. And that is pull request 16105 if anyone is interested. But the failures are beyond just what this PR is addressing. They are in like the reworked functionality of the base setup, which now supports better resolution of minimum versions, but it depends on a specific constraints file, which I think is placed differently and is using UV package manager, and I think it doesn't play nicely on Windows and has some other issues that we need to iron out. Okay, so the last point is that I would propose to triage pull requests which are tagged for JupyterLab 4.2 release, possibly off the record if we have time after discussing the remaining items.
Cool. Thank you so much, Mike. So that Lumino PR you linked, that was merged and it's been released. It's just that lab doesn't have it yet. Is that correct?
Yes. So in the Lumino we released a small release which includes 2 pull requests, both improving prevent default behavior to like make keyboard integration better, but
Right.
it has some side effects, and we are like trying to iron it out on the JupyterLab site. And by the way, also greatly improving the experience for non-US keyboard layout users.
Awesome. That's great. Cool. Okay, any comments on any of those things that Mike had?
I had a question about the communication about the beta release. So in the beta, we have now the full windowing mode for the notebook. And I was wondering like how we should encourage users to try that and report issues if they have any, so we can make an educated guess on whether we should keep it as default or not. Because last time we were still seeing some issues with scrolling. I remember seeing some with Notebook 7 as well. Haven't checked yet with the latest beta, but I was curious, like if we should really be active on, for example, on social medias or discourse to very like try to ask people to use it and see like how much time we allow ourselves to take a final decision.
So last time we published some kind of social media posts on Twitter and Mastodon when 4.1 beta 1 was released. So I think we can wait about 1 week to like make sure that we are asking users to test the like beta release, which is way more representative of the final. And I started drafting the user-facing changelog. Thank you for highlighting that we still needed to do that. But it's like the dark, high contrast theme. I think when that's merged, we will also want users to test that. So let's make that happen together. I don't know whether like it makes sense to write a blog post. So for context, last time when we tried to ask the Jupyter social media group to publish a notice about beta testing and to encourage people to test, the reply was that from the official accounts, they would only, especially on Twitter, they would only like tweet about the blog post. I think some members of the group are on the call, so please correct me. But they were happy to like retweet our personal tweets from our accounts. I don't know if we got retweeted on Twitter or not. So if we want higher, like wider reach on socials, I guess we might need to write up a blog post rather than just ask social media group for yeah, for a tweet or something, and we probably should give them heads up that that might be coming.
Yeah, and there is also, I guess, the question of the delay, right? Because if we need to wait 1 week for the post to be published, then it's going to affect our release timeline.
So
And
I think the policy of the group, and maybe Andrew can correct me if I'm wrong, is that they'll post a link to another Jupyter property. It doesn't have to be a blog post. You can write a discourse post. It's much lower barrier. Or you could even point to a changelog file or something. Like, as long as the link is to some other Jupyter publication of some sort, that we can have that be posted on our Twitter. So maybe if a blog post is too slow or no one really feels like writing it, making a discourse post or a GitHub issue or some link to like a markdown file with a changelog or something like this is also acceptable.
yeah, like at some point during the 3.0 release, I think we had an issue about the simple mode, and we were inviting users to give feedback there. Maybe we could have something similar for this particular feature, unless there is already an issue open, or if it's still open, we could just encourage people to interact there.
So by issue you mean topic on discourse?
No, for the simple mode thing, it was an actual GitHub issue, but we could have both, I guess, if some users are not, familiar with GitHub. It's fine, I guess, as long as we monitor the two platforms. It's fine
Sounds
to
good.
have two, yeah. Cool. And I was also wondering, like, since we have this notification built into JupyterLab, like, have we ever used it for making such announcements? Like the thing that shows up on the bottom right corner of the screen, like trying to say, okay, a new release is coming. Would you be able to try, for example, the new full windowing mode? Like, have we ever used that feature?
Not as far as I know.
Because I think that was.
I'd be so pissed if that shit showed up on my computer. Like if I had JupyterLab for like 6 or 8 months, and then you guys are like, oh, 6 or 8 months in, it feels like there's telemetry. I don't know if that's a good look.
No,
But
no,
that
no.
was that. Wait,
Wait. Things already come up, and you've either said yeah, tell me, or no, don't tell me. If you said no, you won't see. And if you said yeah, you asked for it.
I mean, I understand where Tony's coming from though, because like I've had apps on my phone where I accepted notifications, and for the first 6 to 8 months, I only got like super important notifications, and then some growth hacking consultant says, "Hey, you can get more clicks if you start sending lots of notification spam to people." So I agree that we should have like a high bar for what constitutes a notification.
Andrew and then Jeremy.
I wanted to say that so like interpretation of charter historically depended on who were a member of the Jupyter Media Strategy group at the moment. So I have in my to-do list to at least submit a suggestion on how to update the charter to like clarify all these different points. But current composition of the group is quite open to the like empowering the people who submit posts, so to say. So like if you would ask us to retweet like a tweet or other type of the contribution, Hachiderm post or something like that of the contributor, that is definitely an option. Reposting, like publishing a link to one of the Jupyter like publication sources other than blog is also definitely an option. But like retweet, repost is also great. It's empowering community. That's what we should do more as a media strategy group. Thank you. If you have other questions about it, I could answer them.
Jeremy.
Yeah, I was just to give more context about this notification. So if I remember correctly, that was the one of the purposes, I think, right, to allow such feature to be in JupyterLab, but I think it's still opt-in. So it's like you have to explicitly say yes to get the Jupyter news. I think that's what it's called in the interface. Yeah, that was just to clarify that it's not going to show up unless you accept it. And I think that was one of the motivation. And if we are not using it for that purpose, then maybe it's worth reconsidering having something like this in lab.
I'm wondering if Jupyter Lite is the vehicle for people testing this out. Like, it seems to me increasingly more and more less people own their Jupyter instances. And one of the people who's really going to influence some of the feedback are like college students or like people using it heavily. But if they can't update their instance, then how do they ever know? So I'm wondering if there is run Jupyter Lite and say, hey, we've got a new version. Here's how you can try out high contrast mode. And then all the notifications make a lot of sense in Jupyter Lite mode. So like, kind of like a bootstrap tour kind of deal. So if Jupyter Lite becomes the vehicle for these pre-releases, then that's great. But in my experience testing Jupyter, the distance between the user and having the product is very far if it's building from source, but then even if it's installing from pip, it still takes a while. But like Jupyter Lite, you can test right away and see how people feel. So I'm wondering if that's actually a potential vehicle for these pre-releases.
So this actually raises such an important point. Like, if you have 1,000 students in a class using Jupyter to learn statistics, and each one of them, let's say half of them or a quarter of them, whatever, said yes, I want to see updates, but then they get these updates to releases they can't possibly act on because it's hosted on a webpage somewhere, then that's not really a good outcome. Like, it seems as though those things popping up in user land have to be things that we're confident users want to see. And users in Jupyter are not like users in VS Code, right? VS Code you probably installed on your computer, or it's managed by an organization you're a part of. But Jupyter much more frequently is managed by the organization you're a part of, and only infrequently is the one you installed yourself. So inviting people to do a test, that seems kind of okay, right? Inviting, because anyone can choose to do that. And if they've said they want to see updates, well, that's an update. But saying there's a security release and you have no chance to update it, I don't know. That might actually cause you, worry.
You might lose extent. There's a lot of things that can happen. I think we're all in agreement. One of the things that I ask when we're talking about like these pre-releases is how do we meet the users where we are, right? So like a lot of things we're thinking about channels that we have, and they're drippy channels. Like we don't have as much, like except for Medium, we don't have like reach on Mastodon the way we used to on Twitter, for example. So the hard challenge now is how do we meet the users where they are when the cloud native is like world is a little bit different. So I think that changes how we access our users.
Andrew, I would propose that you, being a part of both these groups, maybe take this question of, hey, Jupyter has these two user-facing products that are wildly popular and has built into it a news notification thing. What's that actually for? Someone's got to do this thinking. Obviously, we've had a bit of a conversation about it now, but we should maybe have a coherent view about what this is actually for. Since we haven't used it yet, we have an opportunity to not misuse it. Okay. How about we move on to Ely?
Cool. Yeah. Good morning / evening / whatever, wherever you are, everyone. I have mentioned this in a few other meetings, including last week's JupyterLab call. So sorry if this is repetitive for anyone, but on Monday, April 29th, Bloomberg is going to, in New York, host another Jupyter Open Studio Day. For anyone who hasn't been to one before, doesn't know what to expect, it's a very sort of loosely defined event. The intention is to provide space and resources and time for folks to come together in person and work on anything Jupyter that is interesting to them. It's where I made my first ever contribution. It's where I've met a lot of core contributors through the years and like built up my Jupyter community. And you can dive into issues, dive into reviewing stuff, or just spend the entire day talking. There'll be some informal demos going on at some point in the day. There will be food provided, and it is typically a really great time. I'll be flying in from San Francisco. We'll have folks flying in from Europe, and yeah, I'd love to see everyone there. I put the registration link in the meeting agenda, but I'll also post it to the chat in a moment. And yeah, if anyone has questions, please let me know.
This is great. Thank you for hosting this. I hope it's a great success. Okay. So I wanted to raise a point, and looks like no one else has added anything to the agenda. I'm going to propose talking about this with the sort of questions you may have that you want to see on YouTube one day. And if there are questions you do not want to see on YouTube one day, we can also take that portion of the discussion to the post-recording portion of this call. But yeah, so the past few months in the Jupyter Executive Council, we've been doing a lot of research, talking to a lot of different groups, talking to other fiscal sponsors, and exploring also the idea of forming our own organization, a 501c3. And the Executive Council, after all of that, has come to make a proposal, which is that we move Project Jupyter from our current fiscal sponsor, the 501c3 called NumFocus, to a different fiscal sponsor, the 501c3 called Linux Foundation, which I'm sure most of you have heard of. And we have been soliciting questions from the community on a GitHub thread, and also through our mailing list, and also through our office hours. And as those questions come in, we've been trying to answer as many of them we can as clearly as we can on the actual document itself, at the bottom of which there's a frequently asked questions. But, you know, there's only so much that we're going to fit, and there's only so much text that people can consume. So I figured a different tack for all the members of the EC to take is to go to the sub-projects that they're involved with and talk about them there. I appear to be the only member of the EC here today, which is rather unfortunate, but here we find ourselves. So I'm not sure how many of you are totally unaware that this was happening. It's been going, the conversation's been going for a couple of weeks, so hopefully this isn't like a surprise that you're first hearing, but if it is, that's okay too. But yeah, I mean, was there any aspect of this that anyone here would like to talk about? And, you know, don't feel any particular pressure to talk about it for its own sake, but really I just want to make sure everyone has the opportunity.
What are the key benefits of moving to the Linux Foundation from non-focus?
I think the easiest sort of carrot to point at is something that actually non-focus itself is heading toward too. There is a type of nonprofit in U.S. tax law called a 501c6, which non-focus is also currently in the process of spinning up one, and the governance of a 501c6 is something where you could have a board, and the board can be composed of a rotating cast of donors. And so instead of making a charitable donation like an individual you or I would, it is instead you make a subscription, a 2-year subscription to have a member on on this body, and that's something tentatively we would call the Jupyter Fund. And what the Linux Foundation can do is set this up, because it's actually like, it's not going to be a new legal entity with our name on it. It's like part of the structure of LF. The same way if non-focus does it, it would be part of the structure of non-focus. Like Jupyter doesn't create these entities, but they have, a team to go out to companies where they have relationships, and effectively it's like sales, but it's fundraising and not, it's a similar sort of sales effort and life cycle, because they're sort of large numbers and you have to go to institutions and do that. But it is just something we don't have a core competency, right? We would like for Jupyter to have, 4, 5, something like that, full-time employees, to do things like keep the lights on and the stuff that we were just, thanking Mike for doing now. Like we constantly have to thank champions for doing stuff like this. And really an organization like Jupyter would dramatically benefit from being able to afford to hire full-time employees. And we think that the Linux Foundation is our fastest way to get there quickly. That's, sorry, redundant.
Thank you.
Okay, that's long enough. I'm going to, oh, there's an echo. I'm going to stop the recording now in case there are things you would like to discuss off the recording. So brace yourselves.